I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Come on. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Can you feel it? Come on. Yes. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. I hope you feel the love this morning. The love for your mother, the love for you if you're a mother, the love of this community, the love of Mother Earth. Feel the mother love that's all around. I wanted to begin my message this morning by telling you about a bishop who was giving a lecture, a sermon, I suppose, in his diocese. And he says, times are changing and kids growing up today aren't being part of a church as much as I would like them to. Here's what I propose, he said. Every married couple should have 3 kids. 1 to walk the path of the dad's will, 1 to walk the path of the mom's will, and 1 to serve the church. For families, they need to actively be part of the church, he implored. And hearing this, the audience in the church, the congregation, if you will, nodded and murmured in approval. A few days later, the bishop is in his local supermarket shopping for carrots. And as he's shopping, a pregnant woman sees him from across the aisle. Remembering his lecture from a few days ago, she calls out to the bishop, pointing at her womb. She excitedly yells, "This one's yours, Bishop!" Now, I have no idea if you're laughing or not. If we were here meeting in the church together, I know some of you would be, at least Joe Nuri would be laughing at that joke, which would help me make this transition that I'm about to try to make, because it's Mother's Day, and I want to talk about wombs, W-O-M-B-S. There's only one way to get into this life, and that's through a womb. Even God, we're told in the Bible, couldn't just come into the world. God, it explains, had to come through the womb of Mary. And I think it's fair to say that there's no way to get out of this life without experiencing some wounds, W-O-U-N-D-S. Michael Meade, the author and teacher, a mentor of mine who I've met, explains that there's an old idea that a wound is a second womb, out of which is born a person's purpose and passion. For example, a person who may have suffered abuse in some way in their life, that creates a deep wound. Now, I'm not referring to the physical wound specifically. I'm talking about the wound of the heart. It's not uncommon to see a person with that kind of wound grow up and become a passionate advocate for those who are abused. That's how a wound has come to be understood as a second womb. We all have some wounds in our hearts. You may have lost a parent as a child or a sibling when you were young. You may have witnessed or experienced violence, physical or emotional. Some of us have physical wounds that have shaped our lives. Others have been betrayed by someone they trusted. Some have been abandoned. Others have been discriminated against just for being who they are. There are a lot of us who are walking around with a religious wound from bad theology or from the actions of a religious leader. Teachers wound us sometimes with their words. Parents do too. And the spiritual work is to turn those wounds into a womb. I can say from my own personal experience as a father who's had to wrestle with the death of a very young child, that a wounded heart is a chance for a second birth. After my daughter died in 2006, I was having some pain in my back. I was just, who knows why, but I went out to see a health practitioner who could help me with that. And after working on my spine, he said, Marlin, I've studied with Deepak Chopra and lots of these great big name spiritual teachers. And I can not only help rid you of that pain in your back, but I can rid you of your emotional pain. I said, like what? He said, I can lead you through a very simple ritual, probably only take us 3 to 5 minutes. And when it's over, you will feel no more sadness for the loss of your daughter. It's really simple, he said. We will write down a few words. I'll lead you in it, and you will never feel the pain of your grief again. Let me say, if anyone ever says something like this to you, run as fast as you can. Because that person is not going to help you. That person is going to mess you up. Let me say, I know that this person had good intentions and meant well, and I hold no bad feelings towards them. The problem is that despite all of those spiritual teachings and teachers and workshops, he completely missed out on the critical role of pain in the process of transformation. Just as nobody gets into this life without having to spend some time in a womb, nobody gets through this life without experiencing some pain. And that pain can be the source of some of our greatest gifts. We all know stories of great artists and comedians and activists and poets and others who have suffered deeply through depression or mental illness or life circumstances. And out of their suffering, they've created some life-changing work. Think of Van Gogh, Georgia O'Keeffe, Richard Pryor, John Coltrane, Tolstoy, Helen Keller, Anne Frank, Monica Roberts. They've suffered. And out of that wound came something of great value to the world. Now, as for me, having walked through the valley of the shadow of death of a child, there is no tragedy or loss or grief that I feel I can't walk with someone through. Sit with them in some of the deepest, hardest places. And I know something about the healing power of having companions when you're in that kind of a state. out of my greatest wound has come one of my most precious gifts for the world. Now, I spent some time when I was in seminary studying shamanism. I found it to be quite fascinating. And as you know, I traveled for many years in my early 20s around different parts of the world, through Asia and the Middle East and other places, meeting spiritual teachers and healers from many traditions and cultures. And what I witnessed was that in shamanic or transcendent spiritual practices, a person goes into a trance of some kind. Now, some do it with drugs. Others do it with dancing and movement or chanting. Others use pain, like the piercing of the flesh. However they do it, they all go into some kind of an altered state, a trance, if you will. And the way that they describe it is that their soul or their spirit or their psyche, if you prefer, goes on a journey to what they call the other world, or the overworld, or the underworld. And in that dreamlike journey, they collect gifts, little nuggets of wisdom from the ancestors, perhaps, or from whomever or whatever they experience along the way and on the path. And when they come out of the trance, the idea is that they bring these gifts from the other world to deliver as presents into this world. Now, you don't have to believe this concept literally. I share it because it's an analogy to our own journeys of grief and hardship and suffering. When we're in that kind of a state, grieving, hurting, suffering, we are half in this world and half somewhere else. We often hear people say that, at work or something, when they're going through something, they'll come back and they'll say, I'm only half here. There's just part of my consciousness is just somewhere else. If you've lost a loved one or a lover or a mother or a dream has been shattered, if you've been through something, even though you're physically right here, you know that part of you is sort of somewhere else. Your consciousness is elsewhere at the same time. So here's what I want to say. If you're going through something, when you're going through something, if you only see it as sadness, pain, suffering, just on that emotional level or psychological level, then you're missing that you are at the same time, that's all true, but at the same time, you're going through a spiritual experience. And along the way, there are gifts to be collected, nuggets of sweetness and wisdom lying all around. It might come in the form of a loaf of bread baked by a friend. It could come over a cup of tea or even in a dream. The point is that when you get out of surgery, when you get out of a bad relationship, when you come back from a war zone or the site of a tragedy, when you've lost someone or something precious, there is more trying to happen than just your physical and emotional healing. There's what we ministers call a spiritual dimension to what you're going through, and that's why we ministers and rabbis and small group leaders and Sunday school teachers are here to help people to understand the spiritual dimension of what it is we're experiencing, to help us to navigate that part of the journey, that part of the walk that we're on. We are, in essence, midwives of the kinds of second and third births that we all go through in life as we grow more whole and as we grow in wisdom. Your first birth is through the womb, and your subsequent births come through your wounds. When you're in pain, if you're in pain right now, pay attention. Look around. Listen. There's signs and wisdom all around you. Presents waiting to be opened and given back to the world. And be careful of what's often called misery avoiders. We all have them, misery avoiders, whether it's alcohol or some other form of escape, other ways of numbing ourselves when things get difficult. When we do this chronically and we don't allow ourselves to experience what we're going through, we don't get to the next level of our consciousness, of our understanding, of our humanity. We don't develop our full capacity for compassion. We don't fully realize our gifts. They're not really our gifts. They're the world's gifts that are trying to come through us for the good of all. Because as Gerald said earlier, you are unique. You are the one and only you that the world is ever going to see. And the hope of all the generations is that you will live your life in such a way that you will pass on your gifts. It's the prayer of every mother for their child. Just as nobody gets out of this world alive, nobody gets out of this life without suffering. And in your suffering, you are not alone. The key is, how do we transcend our suffering and turn it into a womb for our own rebirth? Now, I began this message with a silly joke about a bishop in a grocery store. And I must admit, I would be horrified if a pregnant woman yelled from across the aisle or any other public place, pointing at her pregnant stomach and saying loudly, "Pastor, this one's yours." Oh, but how I find it meaningful when I see somebody and they show me their scar, either a physical one or an internal one, and they say, "Pastor, you helped me turn this into a womb." Oh. Maybe you didn't know that you have a womb. But if you have a wound, and I have to believe if you're listening to me right now, that you're old enough, that you've suffered. So I'm confident that you too have a womb. Happy Mother's Day. I love you. Amen. Thank you for joining us. For 100 years, All Souls in Tulsa has been a beacon of this free faith. We offer our services and programs freely online for all those who are interested. You can help us to do this by making a one-time gift today or a reoccurring pledge. We really appreciate you joining us and being a part of helping us make All Souls in Tulsa what it is. Thank you.
Our closing music this morning involves you. We want to make room for you to join us in song. And our closing song is De Colores. We'll start in Spanish. Please join me in singing. You'll see the lyrics on your screen. Here we go. De colores se visten los campos, la primavera. De colores son las pajaritas que vienen de fuera. De colores es al arco iris que vemos lucir, y por eso las grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Did you hear me mess up part of that? That's okay. All the colors. Yes, the colors we see in the springtime with all of the flowers. All the colors. When the sunlight shines out through a rift in the cloud and it showers. All the colors. As a rainbow appears when a storm cloud touched by the sun. All the colors abound for the whole world around and for everyone under the sun. Thank you, David, for joining in. Here we go. All the colors, yes, the black and the white and the red and the brown and the yellow. Of people who smile and shake hands and say hello. All the colors, yes, the colors of people who know that their freedom is won. All the colors abound for the whole world around and for everyone under the sun.